Thank you very much for coming tonight. We're really pleased to be beginning this process. I'm going to turn it over to Jim and then to Kurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. The mics are being turned on any second. So, first of all, thank you. Tuesday night, you're taking time out of your busy schedule. We want to thank you for being here. I want to introduce any elected official that is here. We have Councilor of Ward 6, Peter Capano, right there. Over here on my left, Senator Tom McGee is here. Am I missing anybody? Peter, any other councilors? Councilor Ward 1, oh, I'm sorry, Wayne Losey is here. If I missed anybody else, I'm very sorry. I just want to say the history, what's brought us here today. In 2006, believe it or not, 11 years ago, we started with this, looking at our waterfront, right? And when you look at the Lynnway and you look at the waterfront and you see, in no disrespect if the owners are here, but Kentucky Fried Chicken, the car dealerships, etc., we said we can do better. And one of the best things, and I've been around, believe it or not, almost 30 years, but one of the best things that ever happened that I was involved with, and Peter Capano was at, I think, every one, we had 19 public meetings. And we said, listen, we want to come up with a new waterfront, and pardon my back, but you can see the green area that is there. And we said, we can do better, right? And so we asked the public, what do you want on the waterfront? Those 19 public meetings led to the passage of the master waterfront plan. So that went into effect. That led to new zoning, which was passed, which somebody could come in and build by right, mixed-use development there today. So that happened. That was in 2006. Simultaneously, the green area, excuse my back. This is Revere, the bridge. All of this area is green. Primarily it's green because power lines hug the coast. So as we were coming up and saying to the public, what do you want there? We were also saying, we've got to remove the obstacle, which were the power lines. We came up with $6.5 million, took those power lines and moved them to the other side of the Lynnway. So government's role, we set the vision with all of your input. We removed the obstacle. And the other thing that happened simultaneously, about 2009, I believe, we filed and passed with the state. City Council voted and filed with the state a municipal harbor plan, which also is helpful in developers and development. Okay, so all of that led us to kind of the final piece, which is the open space, which is what we're talking about. Any development that happens on the water, it's guaranteed that public access occurs. So it's critical. So if somebody were here today saying, I want to build mixed-use apartments there or whatever, there has to be public access along the waterfront. So the city doesn't own any land there. It's all private property. EDIC owns where the ferry is going. So EDIC owns that lot. Outside of that, it's 100% owned by the private parties. So that led us to the state, and I'm going to introduce Kurt. There's Kurt over here from the state. He's a nice fellow, so it'll be nice to him. No, but we want your input. So when we're talking about development, it's critical not just to have a bunch of buildings, right? But I'm born and raised here. I'm a Lynn product. I've never gone down behind like building 19. What's there, right? So this is an opportunity to enjoy, similar to the Lynn Shore Drive where the public enjoys, right? This is an opportunity to have development, but it's an opportunity for you to say, what do you want to happen with this open space? So that's the history. I was supposed to speak for 2 minutes and introduce Kurt from the state, who is our partner. Kurt?
So, good evening, everyone. Kurt Gertner. I have the privilege of working for Secretary Beaton at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I manage a program called Gateway City Parks and am the Secretary's designated something called the Lynn Lead Team, both of which are relevant to this evening's conversation. And I would say, echo something Jim just said, which is I believe we're all here because of an opportunity. So Lynn has the opportunity of a wonderful waterfront site. Waterfront not being something that every city can claim. And what I view this is an opportunity to basically focus on that resource and decide how it can be best used to provide for the future of the city of Lynn. The administration has... Thank you. And one of the reasons I'm here this evening is that the Baker-Polito administration, working with Mayor Kennedy, Senator McGee, and others, has chosen to convene something called the Lynn Lead Team, an opportunity for state government, federal government, and others to basically work with the city, landowners, to advance economic development and revitalization in the city of Lynn. And the opportunity that my office, Energy and Environmental Affairs, had to contribute to the cause is to help the city think through its open space opportunity on the waterfront. In the 305 acres you can see behind me, from the Edwards Bridge to the Nahant Causeway, you have about 1 3/4 mile of waterfront opportunity, an opportunity also to think through the open space that you want to provide in that zone. Open space that will matter a lot to the future of the residents in that area and will matter a lot to the rest of the citizens of the city of Lynn. It's essentially a chance, an opportunity as development occurs in that 305 acres to get it right, to make sure that as development occurs parcel by parcel across the waterfront, that the recreational open space, the kind of things that really make for a good city, are realized as those developments occur. I also want to recognize that the Department of Conservation and Recreation has a couple of pieces of land that are part of this zone. They're represented this evening by Patrice Kish. And there are two opportunities here. There's the Lynn Heritage State Park on the end, sort of toward the end near Nahant, as well as a couple of holdings near the Edwards Bridge. Part of the process today will be to think through and to begin to plan for the revitalization of those resources as well. We know we have a couple of pieces of land and a heritage state park that can contribute more, and this would also be a process to look at some of the design and revitalization of those resources. So one other thing to mention is that the process to revise your harbor plan will follow an effort that we're beginning tonight. So this is a effort to look at the open space in the waterfront, to plan for it, to provide access to it, to ensure that people from all over the city can get to the waterfront and take advantage of those opportunities. This will also be the beginning of the thinking through of what the harbor plan amendment that will be necessary will include. And that process, the amendment process, will follow what we're engaging in this evening. Lastly, the executive office has hired the firm of Brown, Richardson & Rowe and their subcontractor, the engineering firm Stantec. Those two firms, and we're going to hear from them this evening to talk for the most of the evening, and they are the ones who will be working on behalf of the city of Lynn to engage in this planning exercise, to work through the opportunity with you and to realize the outcomes. And so I'm grateful to be here. I'll be here throughout the evening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Clarissa Rowe, Brown, Richardson & Rowe, to take it.
Thank you, Kurt. Who are we? Brown, Richardson & Rowe is a firm of landscape architects, and we have specialized for almost 35 years in public waterfronts in urban areas. So we're very excited about Lynn. These are a couple of pictures of work that not only was planned but built, one in East Boston on the left, and on the right, something that was just finished through Kurt's program in Fall River. It's important to get families and children to the waterfront. You have a tremendous opportunity, and while there are some potential issues, they're ones we should be planning for now. This is a picture of Spectacle Island, which is in the middle of the Boston Harbor. It was an old garbage dump, and it is now a park that you can go out to every summer with wonderful views back to Boston, kind of like the views you have from Lynn to Boston. It's a tremendous resource. This is what Lynn could have. And what we're going to do tonight is really walk through. Dave Andrews has put together a great slide presentation of really specifics about what each area, including the ferry terminal area and the Lynn State Heritage Park, and try to get your ideas. This is the beginning meeting. We plan to have more meetings, but I'm going to turn it right over to Dave and let him begin. And then we'll have your questions afterwards. If anybody needs Spanish language translation, please raise your hand. Great. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us and the great turnout tonight. As Clarissa said, you know, the biggest thing that we're trying to do is find ways to activate the waterfront and connect it to downtown. And so what we're going to do is, this is the first of what's going to be 4 larger scale public meetings. But in between them, we're going to have smaller breakout meetings. So maybe it's site walks, the different parts of the site, maybe it's a focus group, or maybe it's with individual community groups, just to talk about it in a bit more detail and to make sure that we're getting everybody's input properly. We'll outline this a little bit later, but we also kind of want to design this public engagement process with you, so any ideas or things that make it easier for people, please let us know. And as everybody's mentioned, this really is about this engagement. What makes any good park or public space is that it's been designed around what the local communities really want. And so we're trying to embed all of that now that we have the opportunity to set up this master plan for the waterfront. So I guess it's good to talk about what an open space master plan is compared to other sort of drawings and plans that have been done. And there have been a number of things that, reports that have been made over the years also about this waterfront. And what we're trying to do is focus on things like, you know, parks on the water, promenades along the water's edge, public space where people can go and gather at night and different times of day, different activities people can do. And so it's all about, locating approximately where these are going to go, understand the size of these different types of spaces based upon what seems to work with the local community and your ideas and what you know from being out here. And so we'll try to stitch all these ideas together and come up with this kind of broad scale plan of where all these pieces of the puzzle fit. And so we're effectively making a structure, a spine from which all the development that's going to be happening, that may or may not be happening along there, can, use as their, almost the outline of what they're going to be doing. That's kind of the guidelines that they're going to be following when it comes to open space and public space. So that's the gist of what our end product after all these different public meetings is going to be. And I guess maybe it's a good place to start is what makes a great waterfront. And to us in the work we've done and things that we experienced is it's all about having a multiple variety of different things to do at different times of day for a whole range of different people. So it's not just one thing, one park or one gathering space or one pathway along the edge. It's about being able to have different options at different times of day and really just maximizing all these activities and uses. And it's about programming the uses that happen along the water's edge and tying it into the city's history and getting people down to the water's edge and being able to touch it. Because it's not something that, except for, say, Lynn Heritage State Park, if you've been there, you can almost get to the water, but not quite. And so how can we get that access? How can we use the water, beyond the water? It's a relatively calm bay there, so there's opportunity for that as well. Excuse me. There's also, as we'll talk a little bit more, there's a lot of erosion of the water's edge, of the existing seawall. And we can start to look at how this water's edge can help stabilize that coast and how we can take advantage of it through use of things like living shorelines, maybe rebuilding existing wall in certain areas where it's right. So we'll look at, as part of the process, we'll look at a variety of options that best suit different parts of the site for how we can stabilize the edge, which you'll see some pictures a bit later of what I'm referring to. So we'll take a step back briefly just to look at how this area of the city was actually formed. The old water's edge, you see in the blue line, was quite curvy as it goes through, and it's all effectively formed by the water, tides coming in and out. And over time, you start to see where the city has filled in the land. And these parts here were generally for industrial uses, say mid-century. There's a lot of, that was a primary use on that water's edge, this filling into the harbor. The city itself is up against it in some areas, but I feel like over time, the harbor itself has receded. The seawall was pushed out. Just looking here, this is an old map, green showing old marshland, blue is the old harbor. You can see estuaries that were formed in there and a much more winding edge of the city. Over time, this is now the line of the waterfront edge. And that's how much the city has filled out over the years. And so this is a key piece to be aware of. There's also regulations that define how you can develop in what's called filled tidelands. And so this kind of pulls all those together. You'll see our site outlined in blue, defined by the Lynn Way on the north side, the harbor on the south side, with the old marshland and the old harbor. That was old water that used to be there, but it's now filled land. So today's condition, this is where we're at now, or say mid-century, maybe 1960s, 70s, they built the seawall, but since then it's been eroded behind the seawall, just from the water coming in on different storms. And so, this is the flea market. Here's Walgreens. Just get a sense, rarely people go back there very much, and you'll see, looking a bit closer, this is those same areas eroded behind the wall. So we're dealing with these pieces. There's nails and iron and old pieces of wood down there, but there's also some really nice spaces carved out by these beaches almost that are still there, and views back to Nahant, to Revere, and to Boston. So there's actually some really nice stuff out there. So how do we work these pieces into whatever happens in the open spaces along the water's edge? So as we do this, I want to throw out a couple critical factors that are going to influence what we can and can't do, or how we can do it. And a couple of those are Chapter 91. One is a designated port area, or a DPA, which exists here. Also, the effect of rising water levels and bigger storm surges and flooding on the site. And all these factors are going to influence how and what we can do. So, Chapter 91. It's an old regulation, in 1866 when it was actually brought into law, but it basically enshrines the right for citizens to access the water's edge, to use the water itself. And so as we develop, or as developments or private land is turned into developments, it is a way to enshrine or to require and to ensure the public has access to the water. So we'll try to be using these you actually can use these and leverage this as a way to ensure we get the access. The gray here is indicating our site. That squiggly black line is what's called the Chapter 91 line, which reflects the more or less the original shoreline. So you can see how much difference it is now. Jump ahead to some flooding impacts. So there's storm surges. So in a very big storm, there's water coming into the site. There's also tidal. So at average high tides or extreme high tides affecting the site. We'll look quickly, just kind of walk through this really quickly. There was a Weston & Sampson engineering company did a report last year about resiliency on the Lynn waterfront. It's up on the EIC website. And the critical thing is there's parts along the water's edge now in this yellower color where just at a high tide, water encroaches into the site, past that old seawall line. And they projected out 25 years to 2041, and then there are 25 years to 2066. And you can show, so in their projections are kind of assuming that rising sea levels are rising, which they've calculated and they are, so as time goes on, the impact gets greater. You can just see in that red and the orange, if their extreme projections are correct, there's much more encroachment if you don't touch the site and deal with the seawall in any way. Jump a little bit to flooding. So this drawing shows what's called a 100-year storm, which is, it's a very big storm that we probably all have experienced at some stage in our lives. Sometimes it's not necessarily a hurricane or something like that, or even a storm that's been named, but heavy rain for over sustained periods, often combined with really high tides, can create what's defined as a 100-year storm. The way they calculate this is, it just says that it could happen 2 years in a row. Doesn't mean it won't happen every 100 years, but it's just a measurement of a very large-scale storm and with a lot of water. It says basically this could happen. It's a 1% chance per year that this could happen. But the critical thing here to look at is the blue, which is the current existing likelihood of this flooding on the big storm. This is how much. Here's the Lynnway, somewhere buried here. Here's the commuter rail line on a GE site. There's potential for water to creep in, and I'm sure you've seen in different high king tides of last year or other events, you've seen water flooding on different streets, and this is kind of what that's showing. So that's a real issue that's there, and also FEMA maps, if you're aware of them, define this almost the whole site as a floodplain. So that's something we can, and this is projection further out, 50 years from now, just showing, it gets even more extreme as time goes on. And these are the king tides I'm referring to. This is Western Ave and Hathaway Loading Dock and Canal Street parking areas. So you see the water has already approached these areas during certain events. And the point is that these things may become more frequent. So how can we use the waterfront edge as part of the parks to help defend against some of this? And that's something we can look at. Another more regulatory-based site consideration is designated port areas. And there's a portion of the site which is a designated port area, and basically the uses you can develop and do in there have to be strictly marine-based for marine-based commerce. So it can be processing and manufacturing plants, but all to do with marine-based uses. And this picture here just kind of shows part of the site where this black line is the DPA, the liquid natural gas tank. Here's the ferry terminal, which satisfies this DPA definition. There's other uses down here, other piers, and processing areas that are in current use, but a lot of this area, just to point out, is unused in any way. But having said that, we still have to adhere to this outline, this boundary, and what we can do. Touch briefly, Jim touched on this as well, is this blue is privately owned land, the pink is publicly owned land like DCR or EDIC or City of Lynn, and the yellow is public utilities, so Mass Electric or National Grid owns a fair portion of the site. So these are as we do anything we're going to be doing, we're going to have to be discussing and collaborating with all these groups throughout the process. So it's not like we own all the land, we can do whatever we want. There is a process we'll have to go through, and I just want to point out how different pieces of land are set up, noting that this is Lynn Heritage State Park up here, and this is the South Harbor site with the fishing pier. I should have mentioned back in the beginning of all this, and I think Kurt touched on it, was that it's a master plan process where we look at the whole of the waterfront. There's also kind of a separate stream, which is looking at these two DCR pieces of land and coming up with the actual design, a concept design for each of those pieces. So we'll get into that more when we define the public meeting process, but I just want to highlight those parts as we go through. So I'm going to zoom into the site here. As we know it, this is our site that we're looking at. A couple key areas: City Hall, downtown area, the community college, Market Street, Pleasant Street, and Lynn Commons up here along the top. So I think, like I said, the ferry terminal, Lynn Heritage State Park, and the fishing pier at General Edwards Bridge. And what we're going to be trying to do is link all these pieces that are there, Neptune Park and the future T-station that might happen at GE, and potential new Lynn community bike path, which might reuse the old abandoned rail line. So these are potential new products that are coming up, and how do we stitch all this together, as well as looking at how we link the waterfront itself all along the side. And this is jumping out around that DPA area I was talking about. And so, like I said, it's about connecting, downtown and City Hall, community college to the water, down certain streets from Lynn Common, through neighborhoods and Neptune Park, and how do we make these clear, obvious, and safe access across the Lynnway. This is a critical barrier we need to cross, and how do we do that in a safe and inviting way? Some of these topics that will come up aren't necessarily everything we can resolve in this process, but it's all about identifying and trying to map out how we get there in the end. linking through future, which may become a future housing and offices, as well as the T station, and potentially along the estuary's edge underneath the bridge. This part here, we want to jump to looking at a couple key areas on the site that we have just initially identified. And we may find more as part of this process, but a couple spaces or areas have jumped out as certain potential. One being the South Harbor site. There's a development site to the rear, but public easements and DCR easements, DCR-owned parking area and DCR-owned fishing pier, all on this site. So how do we get access from parking areas and through some of these down to the fishing pier itself? A central area, which is the old landfill, which has been capped. And how do we, is there an opportunity to transform this into a park, as Cliff was saying? Say it was done at Spectacle Island, and there's numerous examples of converting old landfills into public spaces and public parks. This is the ferry terminal, which is proposed to have a ferry terminal building on that site right next to the existing parking lot and ferry dock. And is there ways to increase some of the activities that happen at that site right on the water's edge? And finally, Lynn Heritage State Park, which we've discussed, and coming up with some new ideas how to enliven that space and make it something that's more used and better accessed from different parts of the city. So we'll dive into each of these quickly in a bit more detail. First being that South Harbor site. These little triangles here are pointing in the direction that the photo is taken, just to clue you in. But these sites are right on the water's edge, and they can be great spaces. They're a little bit, sometimes you have to take small paths to get down there. You're behind a lot of planting and overgrown shrubs. So it's about maybe opening up access, making it more public and inviting. There's areas that are great potential to cut through. Picture looks like one, but what you can do with these spaces, there's a lot of possibilities. This begins to show a little of the seawall that's there and how it's starting to degrade, and also how it's, has been broken through here, and this is naturally formed just by the tides coming in and out in storms. And that's the fishing pier in the rear. So it's about weaving, getting access through different spaces. This particular site, like I said, it's a narrower site, and that this larger area is all privately owned, as is this. So if development happens, we maybe have a smaller piece up front. And so how we look at that is trying to, this is a really basic section which slices through, a theoretical part of the site, and how we might be dealing with the water's edge as the main piece of our work. Having a promenade, but maybe other ways to get access behind some of these seawalls that are in safer spaces to get access to the water's edge. Moving down the coastline a little bit was that landfill area, which we talked about. Here's the old landfill. Here's the sewage treatment plant. These are things we really need to consider what happens in these spaces. But there's also the old Riley Way that already runs down there. Moving down, some of this is quite a large beach. This is about 75 feet receding back to the road itself. It's already eroding, it's like taking away the road itself as it is, but these are potential areas to capitalize on. And again, are there ways to get paths that go up the hillside, and have open spaces, place people can gather, and for recreation, as well as really nice, big, wide spaces down by the water. So we'll be looking at different ways, different options, meadow planting, or how we get a harder edge rather than a softer edge. Different ways we can look at it. Moving up to the ferry terminal, it's a few photos now looking back at the ferry dock itself. There is a pretty open site that's here, which is where the ferry terminal is proposed to be. But maybe there's a chance to look at this space along the water. And what are some ideas, what are some potential for getting people down there? And so this is kind of throwing out ideas here. Could you have cafes or an activity area, or different things that get people down the water at different times of day? Roller skate rental to go along a big boardwalk, water's edge, renting kayaks. How do you increase the number of activities that are happening down there? There's also potential to look at, say, short-term things that we can do sooner than later to actually start using some of these spaces. Land ownership is a key critical part of that, but maybe as we go through and engage different parties, we can start to see who's willing and able to, allow access down to certain parts of the site for just to start to get that access for everybody now rather than long term. And then lastly, I just want to look at Lynn Heritage State Park. It's an existing park, but it's quite underused. Every time I've gone down there, there's no one there. There's parking, and this lot at the community college is often full, and this is half full, but there's not really much going on there. And so how do we get, it's a great spot. It's beautiful views back out over the water, and this is a really nice calm cove. So what are ways we can activate this park, even in its current form? But also we're looking at maybe coming up with a new program of uses and a new layout of some of the spaces. Just to throw out one more bigger critical piece is that this seawall too is eroding. It's kind of hard to see in these photos, but if you go down there, the seawall edge is doing this winding up and down. And what it looks like is when they built the seawall, it's starting to settle, starting to sink a little bit. Some of the paths are winding. And so, they're big hurdles, but this is part of what this process is, to identify them and come up with ideas and prioritize what we can do to make things better and to improve it and to get people down there. You can see some of that winding of the area. You might be able to see here how this is dipping up and down. And this is that settlement that's happening. But again, what can we do? Can we have outdoor movies? Can we get people down to the water's edge and really start to activate these spaces? So I think the big idea for us today is just to meet everybody, to talk about what we're trying to achieve. But we really, really need everybody to, come up with ideas and come back to us and work with us to help figure out what we should do, what works for you, what would be great to have down there, what would make people start to come down to the waterfront. And we're going to try to, like I said, have a series of meetings, like big scale like this, where we talk in big groups, but then smaller scale meetings where we go out to maybe some of these 4 sites and have a walk for an hour or half hour, walk around the site so you can see what it's really like out there, and then come back to a bigger setting like this and sit over some drawings and talk over and what we come up with ideas and write those down and record those. We'll then build those into a bigger plan and come back with ideas that you've had, and present some drawings about what could or could not happen. So I'm not going to go through each different piece of this, but the idea is that there's a number of meetings we're going to have and a number of follow-up smaller meetings we're going to have. In blue, that's a whole set of meetings that might go for the Lynn Heritage State Park parcel and the South Harbor parcel with DCR. And so that will have its own track of meetings. But to start, we're here today just to kind of give the overview and really just to start to listen to your experiences and your things and your desires that are really going to make this waterfront, really connected to downtown and usable for everybody here. So with that, I just want to say, please let us know some comments. We have drawings to talk about. We have, you can just ask questions. This is being recorded, so if you don't want to have your question recorded, there's pads of paper over there to write your questions down. However you want to do it, we've set up a Facebook page to start, if there's, which is listed here. If there's better ways to communicate, let us know, and we'll try to build that in. Through talking with you tonight, maybe we'll find a better form of communication. So at that, I'll say thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, please let us know.
And one of the things I'll say at the very beginning is this is an open space, and we're talking about parks and promenades. I know there are a lot of people here who had a long history with the waterfront. We really want to hear from you. We're not going to be talking about development parcels, and we're not going to be talking about housing on the waterfront. We're just the open space people. So if you have comments about that, talk to other people, but not us. Okay? But we would love to hear from you. So raise your hand. Yes, sir.
I just want to make a couple comments. I think this is great what we're doing here, and I want to thank you guys and Jim for doing this. Just a couple of things that I think about. Heritage State Park, when it first opened, got a lot of use. And it got a lot of use because we're allowed to use the college to park. And that's why that bridge was built. So now it doesn't get much use because there's no parking. So it's sad 91 requirement, but you know, at the time, so it could be constructed, but really doesn't get any use at all. So when we're going through these, I think that's something that we should keep in mind, because you know, you can satisfy the Chapter 91 requirement right now, but is it going to ensure that the public will be able to use it in the future? So that's just something I think that we should think about. The other thing, so just one thing, and then the ferry area right there with the parking lot. I know we talked about it a little bit. We talked with Jim in the past. That EDIC lot right next to it is just prime space, and I know there's a lot of interest in the community of being able to use that space, because there is parking right there, and it is something that you could do right away. You might be able to do something similar to what they have down in Salem Willows. You know, if it was all grass, people are using the parking lot now in the summertime to sit in the sun and fish off the edge there. So I think that would be like something right away, easily, that we could do. We could also have like those blow-up drive-in theaters where you could see movies, you know, with the parking lots right there. So, and that, you know, I think people would use it, you know, a lot more than Heritage State Park. You know, I'd like to solve that problem too with the parking, but you know, as far as something really quick and easy that we could do, especially until the ferry terminal is there, you would have a big open space that people could use. So.
No, thank you. And as you can tell from Dave's presentation, we completely agree with you. Because it's you know, people just getting to the water and having the parking lot there, and when the ferry is going in and out, it's going to be terrific. Because people love to look at boats, they love to look at water. So we'll see if we can have some sort of partnership or something this summer. We would love to do that. You know, I don't have any money, but I would contribute for it. I want to say about the DCR parcels. As you know, the state and DCR, with the budget cuts, has been severely understaffed, and they know they have a problem. We're trying to help them with it, but we need to be patient. And I think that Secretary Beaton knows about it. And, you know, we're hoping that with this, the spark of this project, that we can generate the interest to make sure that the budget dollars are there. Thank you for coming.
And if you're asked a question, if you could just state your name first, just so everybody knows, it'd be great.
You, on one of those visuals, you had the community bike path coming down. And I'm assuming that there, I didn't see it on the map. Is there any, and this is not, I know, part of in your parcel exactly, but getting over the Linway, is there maybe some of the officials here know, will there be some kind of pedestrian overpass or something?
There was, there was a study done as well, I think just last year, that presented a number of options, and I don't know exactly where it has landed with the city to take options or to fund different options, but that is something, even though, yes, that site's out of our outline, but those connections are really important, so, you know, prioritizing and finding them is key, and also suggesting which ways to get over Linway are preferable as something that's, you know, we should consider, you know, so.
Some of the other visuals, like that picture of terrible graffiti, but going under the bridge, if it just seems like the other side of the bridge. I don't know, there was the article and the picture and the items recently of the big buildings that are big buildings that are going in there. And again, that's not part of what you're talking about, but that's waterfront. Is that going to be connected into this waterfront under the bridge? That could bring the bikes through, I suppose, also.
You know, we don't have the bikeway at the moment is just an idea, but they did contact us early on before it went public to say, how are the connections going to be handled? And the report that Dave mentions is a Mass DOT MAPC report. It's an excellent report. And I think that you know, trying to get across the Lynnway from the rest of Lynn is one of the biggest challenges we have.
Yes, yes. Well, I also want to add to that, the item had an editorial or an article about excuse me, let me hear. The problems that they had in Linfield voting about a bike path. And that's not what I'm referring to, but at the bottom of that column, they talked about the proposed bike path in Lynn, which is complete except for Lynn, and saying something to the effect, oh, I've got it with me, but something to the effect that didn't know how much interest there was in West Lynn, because that's where it's coming through. And I think there's a lot of interest. I mean, I just happened to drive down, I don't know the name of the street, but I looked down a little side street, and there's the wall along the railroad tracks where they painted the mural. Peter, is he still here? He'd know what street that is.
Court?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you know, these people are like getting ready for it. So I just wanted to make clear that there is a lot of interest in it.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up with that? I think she brings up a really
So I could say your name, sorry, just sort of.
Could you stand up so we can hear you?
Yeah, sorry.
She makes a lot of good points about connectivity, and there's not only connectivity coming from Linfield and from the west, but there's connectivity from the south and Wonderland.
Mhm.
People bike that way and they go on the sidewalks, and I think that sort of gets to a bigger imageability problem that Lynn has at that point where you've designated that South Harbor, where that's really the gateway to the city in 1A. And there's a beautiful wooded area there from afar, and you're on top of the landmark, and we all know the rest of the story. But I think, addressing the connectivity from the south is
Thank you. We saw a guy on a mountain bike on the sidewalk.
It was like a road bike, and his gear happened to be on the sidewalk, you know,
Right.
because the road itself was too wasn't safe enough.
there's a big opportunity there.
Yeah, there is. Thank you.
There's a question over here. Sorry to skip you, but he had his hand up earlier. Sorry. Yeah, you. Yeah.
So I'm Jeff Broadway. I live on Thistle Street in Lynn, and the executive director of a group called the Lynn Coalition. It's unions and community folks. We spent about 10 organizations. We spent the last year and a half doing a visioning process to kind of find out amongst our members what people would like to have, out of the development that's exciting everybody, and it's about to change Lynn hopefully in a really big way. And one of the things that came back to us, it was actually not on our agenda going in, and we were asking people about housing and transportation. So what came back was a fourth point, which was green space and something ecologically sustainable. And some of the folks from other countries, they had seen what happened in places like the Dominican Republic, for example, when things got wiped out by development that wasn't planned with that in mind. And people really felt strongly that they wanted to have a family space on the waterfront with picnic tables, places where you could come, bring family, have social events with access from the rest of the city, which was explicitly not a part of the original Sasaki discussion, because I went to those meetings 12 years ago. And also with parking. And Lynn Heritage State Park has some of that. Until I saw that, I didn't realize how much of it faces the water. Maybe it's not designed really with that, I don't know. But the parking situation there, as Pete said, is really prohibitive. I've tried to organize these major events there. You just can't get there if the community college is using their own parking, because they often are. It's a growing institution. So what I've seen so far is, the best I've been able to find, looking at things like the plans for what people call the old Beacon Chevrolet site. It's something called a linear park, which to me, like a boardwalk with a bench, is not what I think of as a park. So, it sounds sort of like alternative facts or something. So what I'm hoping is we get an actual park that has access and parking for folks who already live here, or be able to drawn to and use the waterfront. So thanks for your time and all this, and hope to stay involved with you in doing this kind of plan.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Isaac Simon Jay. I'm a community organizer here in the city, but I'm off the clock, so I'm speaking as a longtime Lynn resident and also as a member of the community group Lynn United for Change. We've had a few initial discussions among our membership, among folks all over the city, and a lot of it's reflected similar sentiments to what Jeff just said and what other folks have said. I want to acknowledge Maria over here and others in the group have contributed to that. So people really want to see a park that meets the needs of families and people from all over the city, not just one particular park, that addresses the desire for things like basketball courts or soccer fields, for playgrounds for young children, as well as just sort of open grass space. And as a soccer player who's braved commercial street fields, which are like incredibly dangerous because of some of the potholes, like that's something that's really close to my heart. I also just wanted to quickly note, I know that I mentioned this is not about housing, but I think the context matters, and a concern that's been raised is that if we end up with a situation where all of the housing along the waterfront is intended for wealthier people from out of town and is not integrated and there's not any kind of inclusionary component to that, it's going to be really tough to make the open spaces genuinely accessible and inviting. And we've seen in other places where technically it's open to the public, but in terms of the feel of it and in terms of the perception of the public, it seems privatized in some ways. So that's a concern that I hope we can address going forward. And just in addition, I just have one question. And in terms of the process that got us here, I really appreciate the long process to create the existing harbor plan and the other plans in place. One thing that planning process produced was a design for what was referred to as a signature park. And that was considered by, I think, the public and as well as by the secretary in approving that plan to be very important to the plan. And just looking at the decision of the secretary, quote, creation of a unified series of public spaces and the creation of a signature park for staging community events are central to the plan. So that was really important. And when development recently sort of reignited in Lynn, the very first, I think, development to move forward, the developers and, their role is primarily to make money. They decided that it would be more advantageous to them to ignore that signature park and to do something else with that space. And to me, it was very troubling and incredible that our own EDIC then went to the state on their behalf and said, hey, let's let them throw the signature park out the window. And I think that's kind of a slap in the face to the people that took part in that. And I guess what I'm looking for is, and this is the Beacon Chevrolet site, and I guess what I'm looking for is some kind of reassurance or clarification about whether this process will matter. Because to me, that really circumvented the whole idea of MHP, which is you have a municipal harbor plan, which is you have public input, and that's the plan going forward. And if you want to change it, that's fine, conditions change. But the whole idea of a democratic process is that if you want to change it, go back to the public first, don't preempt that. So I hope you can reassure us that this process will really matter, because I think it is important. I appreciate it.
So Secretary Beaton in his basically allowing the amendments specified that a public process take place, that the open space on the waterfront be addressed, and the funding being provided and the outcome of this process is specifically intended to help address those circumstances, provision of public open space on the waterfront. So this is very much intended to help think through, work through issues of provision of that kind of public open space on the waterfront.
I appreciate that, and thank you, but I guess the concern is still, that was the central part of the old plan. What if the central part of this new plan doesn't fit the needs of the developer? And I hope we can hold the line and make this really something that's binding, unless and until the public again decides to change.
So Chapter 91 has come up a couple of times in this conversation. It essentially guarantees public access to certain filled tidelands on the waterfront.
And the harbor plan is, in some ways, essentially saying we want relief, we want some change from what Chapter 91 would otherwise require. And in a process to come, following this open space planning exercise, we're going to get into a process of amendment of the existing harbor plan. The question will be asked, does the city of Lynn need any relief from the otherwise applicable rules of Chapter 91? Those Chapter 91 rules do require the provision of public access and open space on those filled tidelands. And to the extent that that sort of relief is required, then we'll be looking for those sorts of, okay, if you're going to build something in a portion of the waterfront zone that otherwise wouldn't be allowed under Chapter 91 and need therefore to provide additional open space somewhere else, the idea is to sort of memorialize that through the amendment to the harbor plan. So yes, that's the idea here.
And frankly, we're not interested in doing another report that sits on a shelf. We've read all those reports. We'd like to actually see something, it'd be great if we can find some sort of grant, maybe through mass development to do some pop-up something at the ferry terminal area so that there is a way of getting, I think the more people you get to the waterfront, and that's why in the future public meetings, we want you to come to the waterfront and to look at it. And the more people use that waterfront, the old uses and the way people have used it in the past start changing. So we hope you'll continue to be involved.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Feinberg. I am a community organizer with the New Lynn Coalition, and I was actually leading a lot of these visioning sessions with about 200 residents of Lynn. And I also have a master's degree in urban and environmental policy and planning from Tufts University. The time I spent studying there, I was focusing primarily on Lynn and on the future of development in Lynn. So I'd first like to say that it's great to have so many people in this room participating in the public process, and I thank you for making this open. However, looking around, I can't help but notice that the demographics are certainly skewing a little older and a little whiter, no offense intended to anybody in this room, and not seeing a translator also English speaking.
We have a translator here.
My mistake on that one, I'm sorry.
Okay, yes, please.
However, I would...
But thanks for your input earlier.
We would, on behalf of the New Lynn Coalition,
Yeah.
we'd like to work with you moving forward on
Yes.
expanding the draw towards these kinds of activities.
Yeah, we completely agree. And Fran Smith this morning at 5 of 9 told me that she did want a translator, and we have provided one today. And we don't usually work that fast. So we would like to have advanced knowledge, like a week.
Sure, absolutely.
So if we could do that in the future, that would be helpful.
And also maybe having some notice out in other languages as well to help.
We would love to do
Absolutely,
that.
yeah.
And Language Connections, which is the company we use, can certainly do that.
It's fantastic.
So.
And I do have one other thing that I'd like to say. As someone who spent so much time and energy focused on the development of Lynn's waterfront, I was thinking if there's a way for us to approach green space, not just as a passive recreational space, but also to look at this as an opportunity for economic development that would really benefit our city. Pete brought up San Willows earlier. I think that's a great example to be looking to. We have a ton of youth employment, a lot of locally owned small businesses that have space to really thrive and serve not only as a home for tourist money, but also as a place where locals have a home to engage, have a place to spend the day in the sun, have a place to bring their families. And I think there's a number of spaces in this waterfront that will work for that. And I would love to speak with you some more about that.
Great.
Sounds great.
We like your background. And one of the things that's very important, the groundwork, Lawrence and Somerville have been really, it's a wonderful organization, and we should probably try to get something like that started in Lynn or get them to come in, because they have a wonderful way of programming youth in these open spaces. If you go to their website, the Groundwork Lawrence website, and look at how the youth of Lawrence is really out there doing cleanups, putting community gardens together, that's the kind of thing that we really need to do in order to involve the youth, because you have to know about people my age. We all go to meetings. The younger people don't come to the meetings because they've got better things to do. But we hope to get them out, and that's why we have a Facebook page. And who knows, we might have Twitter soon.
So there's a question back there, and then we'll over to you guys. Sorry.
Hi, my name's Kevin Reed. I am connectivity, someone mentioned connectivity, I can put that over there. That's a critical issue of what we're talking about here because you can look at similar kinds of developments, and one closest to us right now is Mystic Mall in the Waterfront. When you drive by it, you drive by it. And even when you drive into the development, you're kind of like steered away from a spectacular riverfront. And we have an opportunity down here to learn from that mistake. So whatever's being planned, and I love to hear about that signature park, an active park down on the waterfront, and if you let me draw it on the map, I put it down there in the corner, but it's not my call. But that kind of, to get the kind of use and activity on that kind of facility, we have to lead people into it. It's a simple planning technique that we overlook all too often. Other things to keep in mind is that that right way was put in at that location for a reason. That was to protect public access. That fishing pier was, I don't want to call it excess state money at the time, but it was money that we got a better idea of how to use it than the state did at the time. And that fish pier was put there for a reason as well. That's to protect the principles of Chapter 91, in fact, as opposed to the speeches that get made about those kinds of principles. So in fact, we're able to do that. But I think that whole issue of connectivity is a critical one. It requires significant design and work with current property owners. But it is so important to the success of this overall concept. We really can't let that go by. To make the connections all the way down to the yacht clubs and down to the Causeway is really where we need to get to. I can tell you that fight to design the Heritage State Park the way it is, to take development off the street and out onto, get as much open space as we could. That was a tough fight. And the other one that almost came to blows was the pedestrian overpass connecting public properties to public properties. And you would see a lot of people using that overpass back when there was a volunteer group at the visitor center. They were incredibly active. There's still some embarrassing pictures of people sea serpent outfit on. But that was the result of what you were talking about, and that's community. But I do want to make that point about connectivity from Lynn Lane to the water. It's critical.
Thank you.
So one here, and then go back to you.
My name is Rolf Floor. I live here in Lynn. I work in Lynn, and my credentials are primarily that I like the open space and I like to walk it and things. And I think of the places I go to, first of all, I go to the Causeway right away because it's a beautiful walk. And it seems to me that some way of connecting things over so that there would be some continuity in that direction would be really nice. One thing I've noticed when I walk Minnehaha Causeway, though, is it's a fairly tight space, and so bikers and pedestrians and families with carts and carriages have to all kind of stay on the same space. So some kind of, I'm not saying it has to be perfectly organized, but some kind that recognizes the different uses. So a promenade that is just for walking as it is on the Causeway would be difficult. But the second thing I do when I get tired of walking that place is I drive all the way down to Deer Island, which I think is a relatively successful example of reusing things like old landfills and things like that. They too have a parking issue, going back to that parking point. And they've created a little parking space right there. It's constantly full because people love to walk there. And now they've had to create a new space to open that up right next to it and have started adding parking. So I definitely think access with a reasonable place to park would be really important. And then to address some of the issues about reaching out to young kids, I'd say there are some really creative places that are sort of off the beaten path. I imagine you've already seen it, but I'm not sure if other people have. If you look what they did under the Lenny's Acom Bridge, And that area right along there is pretty interesting things. They created like a park for kids to skate and board, and it, you know, like open fields are really great. Soccer fields, great. Football. There are things that kids are doing nowadays that aren't quite the same. And the parks that they are needing and looking for will look a little different than just an open space. I think picnic tables and green fields are great, but different kinds of hardscapes built in there for active use by younger people have been designed in really creative ways in places like that. And maybe some of those really creative places would be worth doing an outing to. Like that is really, if you've ever walked along that, in addition to the space right under the Lundy's-Aiken Bridge, that's just a unique park for skateboarding really, and biking and things like that. There's all kinds of walkways along there that they've designed. I imagine that they were relatively expensive and maybe outside of our price range here.
You know, the one with the funny light poles?
Yeah.
We did that.
Oh, well, it's beautiful.
And one of the things about it is it sparked development of the skate park.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we're trying to do. It's going to be an incremental change, but that, and of course that was big dig money, but you know, those wonderful light poles, everybody goes by them and says, what is going on down there? And the yellow, that's because it's dark under there, you know, that's what we have to start doing in order to get people back down to the water.
If I could add just one more thing to my laundry list, I'm sorry, but I think that having some kind of art, if you notice the area by Heritage Park where those condo complexes are, if you ever walk around there, there's some really creative looking, I don't know who put them up, I don't know who designed them or what they are, but there's these tiled artworks that go around a good part of that building showing the history of Lynn. They're super cool, they're really interesting, they're relatively large. I don't know how expensive they were to do, but they've actually survived the years very well. So I've been to other cities where they integrate large public art pieces in that, and I think that would be helpful for getting people from Lynn engaged in what's built there.
And I think there are some current projects going on in Lynn where they're talking about lighting underpasses and, you know, and adding artwork and color to different areas. So some of that is, you know, is kind of happening and you're adding on to it.
Mass development work that's going, we're sorry, as we go along the Lynnway, we think it would be great to have pieces of art along the Lynnway that were interesting to draw people in to the waterfront area.
There's one question here, and then I'll come back to some others.
Cheryl Davis. I'm actually an engineer project manager for Lynn. My question is more around the follow-up meetings. You said there are a series of 4. What is the next key milestone as far as finalizing the design concept and moving on to the next step?
So I think we need to figure out a really good method to communicate with everybody. The idea is the next step, we would have 4 site walk meetings to those 4 sites we showed. We can send out a sign-up list and a proposed date for those meetings. We wanted to kind of talk to everybody first and engage with different groups and to get more people into this mix before we set a date. So we'll come back using a Facebook page, using, I guess, maybe we can use the EDSU website, and we have your email list. If you put it on this sheet, we can send a bulk email out to everybody who signed up to let you know when and where the plan is. So we have an individual walk for each of those 4 sites, right? You know, half hour long, and we'll come back to a second big group meeting like this. I'm just going to jump ahead. Again, we didn't want to finalize an exact date to get ahead of everybody, but we're thinking, you know, 3 weeks to a month from now, we're back here. And at that meeting, we can build a process, and the goal with them would be to really kind of, make a much more detailed and programmed schedule from there after we've had a chance to talk to everybody and make sure everybody's on board. So expect that happening maybe in the next 1.5, 2 weeks. We'll start having those site walks is the goal.
And the idea would be to have meetings before school gets out, and then not during the summer, because nobody, you know, people should be using the waterfront. We'll try to get them down there, but then probably have a big meeting in the fall.
Sorry, I ignored some people over here. I think you had a question, and then come back over, okay? So,
okay.
Oh, sorry. Yep. You take your question first, and then.
My name is Clay Larson. I'm with Groundwork Somerville and Bike to the Sea.
Yeah.
And we're in Lynn. We're extremely happy to work with the city on its idea of a community path in Picapano. And I think we've talked about connectivity a lot. It's extremely important. This reminds me, we're doing a lot of work with the Wynn Casino project, right or wrong, whether you support that or not. There's the resources of development can drive, it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity to drive the successful vision for this area. So, and in Everett, it's sort of the Northern Strand Trail is connecting and creating a network of trails. It goes from the sort of regional trail into the neighborhoods. And that's what I see in Lynn, is that this sort of regional trail that connects to the waterfront, does a nice little loop around the city. So, I'm excited to see this because this is the opportunity to make that happen. Also, we're working on a tree planting project in Lynn. So Groundwork is trying to move to Lynn, and we would love to partner with the city. I know the food project does great work with youth, so
Right.
we look forward to being involved.
Thank you.
Kurt, do you want to say something?
Yes, if I could just briefly, I don't want to leave folks with one misconception, which is what exactly is publicly owned along the waterfront. And so right now, the South Harbor site is shown with this red as public ownership. That is a concept we are exploring with the landowner of the South Harbor site. There is some public ownership on that site, a parking lot with a DCR ownership and an access easement to the fish pier, but it is not exactly as configured there. This is a proposal that's been made. We're talking to the landowner. It is not yet reality. So just don't want to leave folks with a misconception here. Thank you.
I should explain that's why it was that light pink. It's a big question mark, but thank you, Kurt. I was supposed to mention that. I lost track a little bit here. One over here? Okay, and then come back, sorry.
Hi, good evening. My name is Joan LeBlanc. I'm with the Saugus River Watershed Council. And I just want to mention, this is the gateway to the Saugus River. That hasn't come up yet. And we're really excited about what's happening here with all this planning. We're a nonprofit organization. Our focus is on protecting and restoring the river. And then the obvious next step with that is getting people out there to enjoy the resource. So we've long been involved with commenting on this piece. We were in on the original planning for the previous plan. We've been commenting on some of the waterfront development and such. And I was on the working group on the resiliency plan as well. So just a couple initial thoughts. First, great to hear you have a pretty comprehensive plan to get a lot of input over a period of time. I think that's excellent. There were some comments about that there aren't young people here. It's not surprising. I think the point was that they don't come to meetings, but there are opportunities to get young people involved with this process. So we could talk offline, and it sounds like you might have enough time to actually go out into a couple of the schools. We have a lot of education programs where they do that, and you'd be amazed some of the great ideas you get from the kids in the classroom. So maybe that might be an opportunity.
And then we could bring them down to the waterfront.
Right. Some kind of event on the waterfront that draws people in and get their feedback while they're there. And then you've got the college right there, so maybe a workshop over there to engage some of the kids there. Just a couple thoughts on that. As far as the actual waterfront ideas, things like that, okay, I'm going to bring up the same theme, connections, because it really is about connections. And it is an opportunity when development comes in. It's an amazing opportunity. Prior to working in this watershed, I worked on Boston Harbor and a lot with Boston Harbor Association. So we were very involved with trying to influence what happens along the waterfront when it is developed so that you don't lose it to the people who care about it, to the connections both back to the city and out to the water. So that's key. Activation that goes from the land to the sea. So getting people not just looking at the water, but somehow engaging on it through boats or other means, boardwalks, fishing, etc. Integrating all kinds of different activities, and I think the ideas that people have been bringing up are really exciting. People of all incomes, people of all ages, people of all interests, whether they like to sit on a bench and look at art or whether they want to do something more active. So that's important to have a wide variety of activities. But I know you don't want to talk about buildings, and I won't talk about specific buildings, but what happens here, we hope, will be a blueprint or maybe a green print for when those buildings come down the pipe. And if it's not clear, then it puts the public officials in a very difficult position of how do we really get meaningful public access here. So I think we need to be very clear about the types of open space we want and the connections that we want that the open space to make. So not just a walkway along the waterfront, but rather maybe different types of parks that feed back into the city. Access that is connected all around the site, so you don't just get to a dead end. Places where people can get to by bike, by bus, by car, whatever it is. So all of those different connections are going to be really important. I don't want to go on too much because I know there's more people with comments. But one final thought on the coastal resiliency piece. A couple things. One point is to make sure that the public access is also sustainable. So I know we have a couple of developments that are already in the permitting process, and without making any particular judgments, the efforts on coastal resiliency, I would say, are pretty minimal on those developments. So the extent that we can emphasize that in this plan, how important it is to make sure everything is sustainable, both the public spaces as well as the integration of those spaces with the buildings. And when you get to the more innovative sites, those things are intertwined. So oftentimes you have water that might be flowing under a building in a certain circumstance if it floods. So I do think there's some integration that we need to not lose going forward.
Thank you.
Hi, Wayne Losey, Ward 1 Councilor. I represent the furthermost part of Lynn from here, but we're just as excited and interested in this as those close to it. And I'm old enough to remember when, as a boy, going to that area at a drive-in theater. It was a wonderful time to go there, having a cool ocean breeze. It's a nice thing that we have. We've heard an awful lot tonight. This is awesome where we're headed. As Jim Cowell said earlier, we've come a long way. There's a lot of work here, and I think we still have a long way to go. We've heard an awful lot of good things tonight. There's not too much I can add to that. I don't know if there was any discussion mentioned on water-dependent recreational use, as well as connectivity and other parks and public access, which is exciting because we're just in this conceptual stage. And I'm looking forward to you folks doing what you're doing, and then down the road, seeing the options and alternatives, and then going through this process and seeing it come together. And this is a wonderful thing for our city, and I think we have to, all of us, each one of us here, have to be grateful and appreciative that we have this and that we're finally moving it forward to whatever this ultimate conclusion will be. So thank you.
Thank you.
This question here.
My name is Don Collins. I live in Ward 1 now, but I used to live in downtown Lynn, and I used to walk right down to the waterfront and enjoyed it. I have a passion about the Lynnway and the area. I worked at West Lynn Creamery for many years, now the Gorelick Farms. I worked on Blossom Street Extension, Rockefeller's Sports Connection. I worked there for years, and even to this day I go kayaking in that area right there. That's my favorite spot to kayak. I agree with you in that access is the biggest hurdle. You're going from downtown, the access, I just don't see that bridge, doesn't really cut it. I've thought of an underpass, but I'm sure nobody else would buy that, but that's the only way, a pedestrian underpass, that's the only way I think only thing I think would work, but which is kind of not really practical. But I would like to see, and I mentioned this to, I see Senator McGee, Councilor Lozzi, and Councilor Campano, I think I saw Mr. LaPierre here. I would ask that as you're doing this, if you would consider making this area totally energy independent. I would like to see that. I went to Commonwealth conversations, and the people in the Commonwealth, Senator McGee was there, and a bunch of other state senators were there, talking about Massachusetts leading the way. Well, I think Lynn could really lead the way in this project if it made its mind up to be totally energy independent in all of this area here. Wind, solar, even tidal energy is a consideration here. So I would just ask that you keep that as a priority. Whatever you do, good luck. I think it's a great idea. But but I would like to see it totally get off the fossil fuel faucet and make it, totally energy independent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to call on Senator McCain next. I'm sorry.
I'm listening.
You're listening?
I'm happy to speak at some point.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad to be here, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think one point I'd like to make, because I want to hear what everyone has to say, is the more input from the community that we can have, the better. And so the more outreach, and I think anybody that's here tonight that wants to have more people here talk about it, let's make sure that these meetings are attended at more and more people. And I think the ability to see the sites and walk the sites is just as important. Because the ideas that we're going to hear from other people are just as important as what we're hearing tonight. So whether it be getting a chance to go through schools, working with community college, community groups, different community groups throughout the community, even little leagues. However I would think getting the word out, because people are really interested in where the city's going, and I think this connectivity is so important. So again, I'm here to listen to what other people say.
Gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bowling. I manage open space protection projects for the Trust of Public Land, but I'm here as a newish resident of Lynn, not as to speak on behalf of TPL. But I'm curious if there's a vision for how this open space will be owned and improved and managed. So for example, will there be a big public land acquisition that leads to the public having clear rights to be on this property? Or will it be sort of incrementally born, privately owned park that happens as sites are developed?
I'm sorry, I was reading something. Can you repeat?
Sure. I'm curious what the vision is for.
Please do, thank you.
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. I'm curious what the vision is for how this open space will be owned, improved, and managed. So, for example, will this be a city park? Will it be a DCR park? Will it be a series of privately owned parks that are developed incrementally as properties are redeveloped?
I suspect we have a combination of all the above. We've already got 2 DCR holdings. We've got some city-owned properties in the waterfront zone, and I suspect that because of the Chapter 91 regulations, we'll end up with privately owned, publicly accessible open space as well. It's sort of to be determined. I don't know yet where on the waterfront the more substantial pieces of park or open space might be located. I don't know who owns that piece of property now. Sort of open to sorting out all as we go through this.
Could I add one thing? The largest landowner on the waterfront is National Grid. And Tom has been helpful in getting them to the table. But when you talk about creating like a park, the landfill, when I was a kid, the city's trash was brought to the landfill. I think it's 20 acres, and I might be off a little bit. But that's right on the Atlantic Ocean, right? Now, National Grid pays the taxes on that property. They shouldn't be in the real estate business, right? So we've moved the power lines. There really is no reason for them to continue to own that land. So that's something, all of that yellow space is National Grid. So you can see how they own such a large piece. I really want them to be at these meetings to hear what the public has to say and look at that as potential transfer of land, whether it's to the state, the city, or
Hi, my name is Rick Wood. I'm Vice Chairman of the Lynn Area Chamber of Commerce. And I just would like to bring a business perspective to this land. I know a lot of people talk about having access for people to the waterfront, and I think that's very important. I think the concept of some kind of a promenade along the waterfront itself would be fantastic. But we do also have fantastic beaches in here that people and families can access the waterfront. I feel like as a business person, what's really important to the city, or a very important thing for the city, quality of life is very important, but and our tax base is very important too. And if we could bring some kind of a mixed use down there of residential and maybe biotech or some kind of industry that would be a clean industry, not a kind of a dirty, greasy, old style manufacturing, but there's a lot of modern industry nowadays that's very clean. If we could mix that with some residential, hopefully market rate residential, and some retail with a nice a nice boardwalk there all the way down to Heritage Park, I think that would go a long way to helping the city. We're a cash-strapped city, and we have very few parcels of land that we can develop commercially. I know we're working on the Dare plant and the North Harbor lot, also known as the Beacon Chevrolet site. That's scheduled to go, but I really think we should try to find some way to get mixed use where the people can access the actual waterfront. I was at the Federal that building is similar to this space, and it's right on the 4-point channel. And so there's all industry there, people working, and they come out in the grassy area, and then there's promenade, and then there's the water there. And I could envision something like that in that space, that we could have, help our tax base and still make it friendly to the public, for the city to come there. I don't really favor a huge park. I favor smaller parks, like Kevin said, on the tip down there as you go around the promenade. But I think we should try to find some kind of mixed use that will really help our tax base in the city.
Thank you.
Hey, Aaron Lieber on Bassett Street. I'm a project manager by trade. So she took my first question, which was dates, and it looks like you've got end of the fall was your last date for the last meeting. We did something similar a couple of years ago at the museum, talking about the downtown area, signage, bike paths, community pop-ups, what have you. The end result of that was, planned in the city, and Beyond Walls is doing a little work now, but really haven't seen much beyond that. We hit the end of the fall, 2018. Are you guys in this through the end? Are you just coming up with a plan and passing it with the city, and we're going to go try to find funds to get any of this done? We're having another meeting in 2020 for the next plan.
That question.
So certainly the Lynn lead team intends to be here to see this through as a result. That's not just energy and environmental affairs, but the administration as a whole. Our lead on this for the administration has been Secretary Ashton, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. The particular program that I manage, Gateway City Parks, is the source of the money that's paying for this planning exercise. In the past, we've made investments in the Common here in the city and a couple of other parks. And the intent would be to continue to work through our open space related funding to advance the plan. It's not something that we're intending to complete and then walk away. Also, as was mentioned, there are several DCR holdings on this. The intent is to do design and construction documents for those holdings so that we can actually do the improvements that are called for in this plan. This is definitely not something where I intend this to be a planning exercise and planning only, but something where the open space outcomes are realized.
Good. Yeah, that was the concern from 2015, I think, at this point. And it was a design package that was handed over to the city of here are the improvements that the city wants, where they want them, and why. And unless I'm missing it, there's been nothing.
For example, the Gateway City Parks program has been around since 2009, and it has taken us almost that long to get some of the park projects we've been involved in done. So you're in it for the long term.
Okay.
My name is
No, sorry, we were just lining up next one. You're good.
my name is Evan. I live in Ward 3. I'm wondering does this supersede the previous plans to extend the blue line? Well, is that still on the board?
This isn't really, I guess, part of that, so I don't know what the updated plans on that are, but they're separate from this. So.
Okay.
Sorry, someone back there yet? Yourself here in the red.
Hi, I'm Katie Cohen. I live on Midwood Street. The presentation at the beginning mentioned the 2006 master front planning process, which had a lot of input that created the municipal harbor plan that went into effect in 2010, from my understanding. Given that we're kind of undergoing this new process for the waterfront master plan to amend
No, the amendment pertained to the site that's been, the Minco development, or the Beacon Chevrolet, or what I've often called the North Harbor site. Our expectation is that the existing harbor plan would apply otherwise, pending the amendment that's going to be coming out as a result of this process.
Development's moving forward after the ones that are currently being, so it wouldn't apply to Beacon Chevrolet if you're working the other two.
The Secretary's amendment addressed the Minco development of the Beacon Chevrolet site. Our expectation is that this process will be completed. We'll have a plan for open space on the waterfront. Thereafter, the city will engage in a process to amend the harbor plan as necessary. And pending that amendment, the existing harbor plan is enforced.
Except for the signature
Circumstances
part, right?
addressed in that letter, yes.
Okay.
My name is Chris Bibby. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I think the community really ought to have a vision about what they want to do with the water itself. You know, we've had a maritime history in Lynn for hundreds of years, which is virtually all gone except for recreational use, for one. Two, to protect what people are proposing to build, you need some kind of a wave attenuator. You need something not part of this plan, but to protect this plan. I'm unaware if there's any plans right now. There was some discussion about trying to find the money to be able to do something like that to protect Seaport Harbor, for example. And if there's not going to be water uses, real commercial water uses, or larger boats put in the harbor, then the 40 acres or whatever it is of the designated port area is not needed. I mean, it was a federal designation. Somebody had to, I know there was money involved, they had to build something or whatever the uses were going to be. But I think if that's not going to be part of the vision going forward, we don't need a DPA. And I can't see any particular use for it. And I can't imagine somebody doing, or them having the capacity to build anything along that waterfront section. And as we can see by the pictures that you've shown here so far, without the wave attenuator, it's going to continue to do that kind of damage and eventually reclaim as much land as it takes for us to finally do something about it. And the private development side, there's certain things that are affordable. I mean, you know, there's a couple of comments about it today. People want to build good projects. They want to have something that's going to be in demand, that people like it's a sustainable. That's not a new word. That's been around for a long time. They're already proposing to build a boardwalk that will run from the extension where the park ends further down to where the ferry is presently. So that's a nice, good start to get going, and it ends where the vacant parking lot is that people could use, and you know, bike walks and all that sort of types of use. So there's a piece of that that's about to happen now, but again, I don't see, if there's not some protection for the harbor front in the harbor, and there's no vision to use the harbor for maritime uses going forward, then all of this is completely appropriate. If there's going to be a different vision of it, then you need something to be able to support those kinds of things. And there is demand, as we have seen on the North Shore, for maritime uses, for not so much on the commercial side, but certainly on the recreational side. You can see when you look at this plan, where the dark spot above the private on the right side is the federal channel that goes in, and then along the waterfront is the municipal channel. But the rest of what you see in there, that light color, are mud flats twice a day.
And they're 5 feet deep.
And not even at the end of the municipal waterway, the water's a foot at low tide. So you can't get anything through there. You couldn't get a skiff through there. So, you know, I think part and parcel of this is really a big vision about what you really want to see have happen with the maritime uses that the city of Lynn has had for a long time, coupled with what are the pieces in place that are necessary to make that vision happen. And having a DPA, if you're not going to use the waterfront, just doesn't make any sense. And if you're going to do all of this development on the waterfront and these promenades, et cetera, and you don't have a wave attenuator, I don't know if it's 5 years or 15 years, but it's going to happen. We've had significant damage to Seaport Landing. I think the most recent budget I saw to repair some of the damage, which was not complete, was in the order of $1 million. And it's just that one section. So I just, you know, I really would love to see something come out of this that's sustainable, that's well thought out, well designed, and well put together, and, you know, it will last a long time. So that's my comments.
Thank you. We do work for the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I believe they share the same thoughts.
No, so aware of the issues you're talking about relative to the coast, the concern that we don't want to be putting in something that will be basically lost to a continued erosion of the coast. So that is definitely a concern. As to the DPA, I'm less versed in exactly, I know that it was considered and addressed somewhat recently, but I was not involved and don't know the details. However, our coastal zone management office is part of the team, and we can take that back to my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Joe Boyd. I'm also with Men United for Change, and I, of course, everything that friend said. But I had an idea. Earlier you were saying you'd like to get people to interested in it, stimulate interest in it now. And perhaps the fact that that, as it exists, is going to be gone soon. Artists may want to go there and capture it. And I'm also with Lynn Arts and Lynn Museum. And even though a lot of it looks like somebody's neglected backyard, there are people who, if they're aware that that's not going to be there in a couple of years, would be interested in going there. And then other people would be interested in the fact that there's an artist sitting there for a week, just trying to capture that.
Cool, thanks. There's a question in the back there.
Hi, Peter Conrad from Lynn. I want to congratulate the people for those renderings. I've never seen that location look so beautiful.
This young woman right here.
You know, here in Lynn, we've always wanted to restore some things that we've lost. And over the years, there were probably 3 or 4 things that I can think of off the top of my head that people refer to and converse about all the time. One of them is our old stadium. It's gone. The question is it gone forever? And I'll mention a few little things about that after I mention these other things. We sure need a hotel. No question about it. The hotel we used to have, by the way, is fireproof, which is a great accommodation. But there's no parking, and it's not big enough. The third thing is, we need a theater. We don't have a theater. And the last thing is, as I say, maybe a school. Now, it sounds crazy, but that location for a school that might lend itself toward nautical pursuits, an international rendering too, international school, maybe one separate of the public schools, but also funded by a separate source, would be beautiful for young people. I don't know how much land's down there, and I don't really know how much space there is, but I know when I've been there at different times for retail purposes, it seems like it's huge. As far as the stadium is concerned, I know that's far-fetched, but in the future, there are sports coming up the line in this country, and Lynn has a legacy for sports. It really does. Talk to anybody around us and they'll tell you that. We need a blue line. It'd be interesting someday for us to be driving or riding in a blue line train and come up to approach the Point of Pines, and then just over that bridge we see a sign saying stadium, and that would be a stop. I think that it sounds a little futuristic, and I don't know what the developers are thinking there. Probably more, if Lynn follows the same path it's been going, more than likely there will probably be more apartments. But gee, the city really is in need of these things, and I think you'd get a pretty good consensus if you took a poll on anything along these lines. Because the harbor is beautiful, but access to it and how we enjoy it would be even more important. Thank you for all your work, by the way.
you.
Just one more thing, I was sort of stuck on the transportation. Just so, because I noticed that the traffic is really bad, so this would really be something, make it a destination area. So it would have to be a lot more capacity for car traffic, right? Because if anybody commutes in the morning out of Lynn, it's already pretty bad. So this has the potential to create one huge bottleneck, for the whole rest of the region in a way. So just developing that area can't stop there. And where all cars go. So that's it.
It doesn't look like there are any more questions.
Well,
there
sorry,
are?
I didn't look.
Over there? I'm sorry. He's been waiting the longest.
I know, we
to
seen
talk.
the first one we walk in. I haven't looked over at all.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I want to thank you for opening up to the public. I find that in general, government has been all backdoor deals. Public interest is waning in certain parts of the country. I think it's a wonderful thing for Lynn to have this input from the citizens of Lynn and the residents of Lynn, because if you go up and down the planted codes, privatization meant no access. And it's a situation where I, the son of a 85, going to be 86 mother, brother to 3 sisters, have 5 daughters of my own, 7 grandchildren. Of those 7, 5 are girls. I'm very interested in having access to these natural wonders that everybody looks on pictures and say, oh, wonderful, but doesn't get to enjoy. And for that reason, I'm here seeking to make sure that this is made a reality. So I thank you for that effort, and I follow and echo the comments of concern that while it may be wonderful to talk about, it may not get realized. So if you're seeking more community support, I'll be more than happy to participate and get others on board so that we can realize Chapter 3 participation efforts.
Thank you.
I'm Sean McGee. I grew up in Lynn, live in Georgetown. I guess my credentials to be here and to talk is that I really enjoy public places to hang out, go to the park, and I've seen a lot of different places around the country that just really take advantage of their waterfront. You know, I've been to Pittsburgh, and you see both stadiums right on the water. On that side is the stadiums, on this side there's shops and restaurants. You go to Baltimore, you go to a number of different big cities around the country. Look at San Francisco, what they've done to, Fisherman's Wharf and different stuff like that. And I just want to thank everybody that's gave their input and really been educational to find out what opportunities we have. And Lynn really, as different people talk, I love the really big issue is connectivity. Kevin brought it up, several people brought it up. How do you get to the waterfront? And I have a question about if there's any idea of accessing this waterfront from the causeway down by the elderly housing there and the yacht club and going right to the Heritage State Park. There was stuff brought up about an underground tunnel. I love that idea, by the way. I don't know if it will ever happen, but we've got the walkway. Kevin said he brought people down there and had a visitor center. Why don't we get something like that going? And I never heard anybody talk about the MBTA garage. Well, there is a garage there, and if we can get the people from there over. But my thought is, we've got one of the most beautiful waterfronts when you go down that Lynn Schuett Drive. You look what they did to the seawall there. The Red Rock Park, what a beautiful park that is. Can't we get people to go access from here and go all the way to that far end where we're talking down by the General Edwards Bridge? But I'm kind of like concerned about maybe seeing this development happen in my lifetime, but we've got stuff that's there right now Why don't we take and enjoy what we do have there and try to access from both ends? And I know it's about development, trying to get economic development, but I think this forum is more about how do we get recreational stuff down there. And the boardwalk going from the Beacon Chevrolet site down to the ferry, that's great. How big is that boardwalk going to be? Any idea? I really haven't looked at the plans or anything like that. But when I look at some of these other city and towns, they're big boardwalks where you can not only have people walking down, but you can have tents, you can have vendors maybe, you know, that are selling hot dogs or maybe a little toy shop or something where we may not have the access behind some of these buildings, but you could maybe put up something like what they had down in Haymarket, you know? The people come in for the weekend, and you get people that are all ages, all families, singles, couples, kids with, you know, families with a whole bunch of couples. So I guess the thing that I can envision is let's take advantage of the natural resources we do have. We've got that Lynn Beach. Is there any way to access from there to go all the way to Heritage State Park? And to your point about recreation on the waterfront, how do we get people in there? Paddleboarding, kayaking. Geez, we got a boat launch right there. You pull up, there's a boat launch. But there's no access from there to Heritage State Park. But if there was a boardwalk that started from there, you might be able to park across the street, get there, get down to Heritage State Park, start coming, you know, when the development starts coming from the other end, connect the whole thing together, and maybe our kids or grandchildren will see something that's like, you know, someone else mentioned a model of putting environmental friendly stuff there, solar, wind, something else. But to see this happening, you all heard of Lynn, City of First. Look at the GE field with the lights there. All kinds of stuff that Lynn has been innovative. I think it's our time to get out there and really push the waterfront to say, hey, let's get people down there, but how do we get them there? And I don't know if you can answer that question about the northeast site of this. Is there any way to get there?
I agree with you. First of all, would you move back to Lynn, please?
You know, if the right opportunity came up, there's no question, and I have no problem. I went to Georgetown, so you all know I've got one daughter that's in Wyndham, 3 grandkids there, so we moved a little bit closer to get to them. We got 2 other granddaughters that are a little further, so Lynn is a tough spot to access out of. But you know what? Maybe if some of them moved a little bit more to the coast, and we could take a boat right out of Lynn Harbor, maybe a good spot. But,
no,
question,
what you're saying is completely right. We went down to see the marinas that are private, and they threw us off the property. There needs to be some negotiation with those marinas to make public access, because there's a link that's missing in the public access piece. Now, my office has been in Boston for many, many years. I've watched the Boston Harbor, the Harbor Walk. Thank you, Dave. The Harbor Walk. It took a while, 25 years to get it to happen. But that's the kind of thing. When we say this is a really important connection that has to be made, that's when it starts happening. So I thank you for your comments.
I'm sorry to raise my hand here. I just have a follow-up question from Mr. McGee. Is this the entire purview of your active area or study area? Because it would be great if something could be done about the red algae and the smell that causes on the other side of the causeway, which is where I live.
I live in a town that has red algae also, and I don't like it either. We do have a lot of ecological people on our team through Stantec. We have 12 people in my office. They have how many? 10 million. I don't know. We'll see if we can get them to look at it the next time they're down on the site.
I'm happy to speak to that too. I think that's a great point, and we've been working hard we've figured out a way to get it off. You get it off early, get it off throughout the season. And we had some pretty intense meetings. The Friends of Lynn and Hot Beach had the commissioner down recently. We met with the secretary, and I think they made a commitment to address it this summer, but I think working with others to find a way to get it continuously off the beach. And the cost is going up in terms of where does it go. So where do we compost it? But it's a really important piece of this whole picture because it really changes the dynamic of public space. Because with that algae on the beach, you're not going to you don't want to be on that public space. So it's hopefully been addressed for this summer. And we're working hard together. And again, when you get it off early in the spring and you continue to take it off, it has really pretty much resolved that issue. And I think it's important that the community at large, the Friends of Lynn and the Hot Beach have been real advocates, working with the legislative delegation on that, and the council as well that's been involved. So.
And it also seems like a great opportunity for some more jobs for winners.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of things about those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for
Great
coming.
point.
This has been a really lively group. We're really appreciative. And please make sure that you fill out your email so you get the notice of the next meetings. We'd really like to have you all there and bring your friends. And write down comments if you didn't want to say anything. Not everybody likes to talk, like me. But
And if you want to also engage with us, because we're going to be developing these smaller meetings, maybe on the piece of paper over there, write down the groups you're from, your name, just so we get that down on paper and we know who to contact.
How are you going to decide who's at small meetings? I don't get that.
This is going to be an evolving process. So I think we have a couple groups that have really expressed interest. So we're going to be talking to you guys clearly. We're going to be, if you want to be part of those groups or form other groups,
you're part of it.
Do that, and we'll talk. There's
Nobody's
no
excluded.
limitations to it, So.